Prior to COVID-19, our world was more interconnected than ever through international trade and travel. But the COVID-19 pandemic changed that, bringing widespread disruption in this global order. If the world has to return to the pre-pandemic world in the near future, it can't in the foreseeable future without a vaccine. And a vaccine is useful only if it is safe and effective. So how is the safety and efficacy of a vaccine candidate ascertained? Vaccine candidates go through several stages before they are made available to us. One such stage is the clinical development stage. Human trials are undertaken as part of a vaccine's clinical development. In this episode, we explore the various stages, including how vaccines work and how they are tried in humans, or what is called human trials of vaccines. Vaccine research begins only after a careful assessment of public health priorities. Work conducted in the basic research laboratory forms the scientific foundation for all subsequent investigation.
You start with the exploratory stage when you develop a molecule, when you develop a drug, or when you develop any new formulation. Then you do the exploratory stage in animals or in different tissues, and then you see whether this is capable of developing antibodies or not. So that is called as the exploratory stage. And then what would be the target population of that? Before that, I think one has to understand for what person is trying to make the vaccine. That is, you assess the vaccine preventable diseases, the population which is affected by such diseases, and what is your expectation about the vaccine, how much vaccine should be able to prevent the disease.
Applied R&D then moves to the clinical research setting, and from there to pilot production and full-scale manufacture. The vaccine must then be purchased, distributed and used. Finally, a surveillance system is established to monitor immunization coverage, efficacy and any adverse health effects related to vaccine administration.
Any vaccine that is administered to a healthy human being needs to be very clearly assessed and approved for efficacy, safety, and also, wherever possible, a long duration of protection. Unless we actually have evidence of efficacy, the vaccine is going to be no use in terms of protecting against the virus. And secondly, we also definitely need proof of safety, because we are giving it to healthy people. We don't want them to get sick because of the extreme side effects or the very serious adverse effects of the vaccine. Then we also would like to have the vaccine have as long a duration of protection as possible, though that's not always very assured. It varies from vaccine to vaccine. So for all of these, we need clinical trials to show how safe, effective the vaccine is for administration to a large number of healthy people to protect them against a virus or any other microbe.
Every attempt to develop a vaccine does not succeed. A vaccine candidate's safety and efficacy determines its success. Clinical development stage in itself is a three-phase process. During phase 1, small groups of people receive the trial vaccine.
Clinical trial is again divided into a couple of stages. That is stage 1. And stage 1 means you primarily give this to healthy volunteers. Remember, this is a volunteer who are healthy, but it may be more possible or risk patients and risk subjects. Now, it is very important when you enroll a healthy volunteer that you have a very strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, and you decide that they are not clinically healthy, but they are biochemically healthy, their parameters are healthy within the age for which the vaccine is intended to be developed, and not suffering from any disease, not have suffered from any disease in recent past, which can affect the results. The phase 1 is, the purpose of phase 1 is an exploratory. And exploratory is primarily for safety and for tolerability assessment.
In phase 2, the clinical study is expanded and vaccine is given to people who have characteristics such as age and physical health similar to those for whom the new vaccine is intended.
This is given in the cases or in the subjects or in population, rather as a limited population, which is at high risk. Say if you are doing in a COVID vaccine, then you will give this to a patient or to a population which is primarily higher risk in COVID. That is called as a phase 2.
In phase 3, the vaccine is given to thousands of people and tested for efficacy and safety.
Phase 3 means you give this a drug candidate or a vaccine candidate in a larger number of population. Now the number of population in phase 2 it was 100, not more than that usually, or maybe few hundred. In phase 3 it is in thousands, and in vaccine this is much larger. It may be 1,000, it may be 30,000 or whatever is statistically valid. This N or number is decided on how much one expects this vaccine to produce immune or preventable. This is also usually done at a multi-center, and these centers, as far as the Indian regulation is concerned, should be preferably from the different part of the country, so that you can involve the patients or the subjects in vaccine case from different geographical location with a different dietary habit, genetic variability, environmental population.
We have to assess also the safety issues, particularly the serious adverse events, and see whether the vaccine is good enough in terms of efficacy and safe enough in terms of not having adverse effects to be given to the intended people. Particularly, as I said, we are giving it to healthy and volunteers. So this is where phase 3 trial becomes absolutely important for us to gauge the safety and efficacy. It may not give you a very good idea of the duration because the trials last a few months or sometimes a year, but you may not be able to get a full idea whether it's going to protect you for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So that is where we get an idea of what the likelihood is by studying not only the antibody response, but also the cellular immunity response. Are the T cells, which are also a part of the immune system, are they getting activated? Are they likely to be really helpful in the future, even when the antibody levels are getting depleted?
Many vaccines undergo phase 4 formal ongoing studies after the vaccine is approved and licensed.
After this phase 3, they compile all the data from the different centers. This is again made a dossier and submitted to DCGI, which again calls to an expert committee who examines this data in detail and give a verdict or give a recommendation to DCGI. This vaccine can now be approved for marketing, or which is called as a licensing permission. Then this can go to the public at large.
Phase 4 is when, even after the phase 3, when the vaccine is given regulatory approval for marketing, it is allowed to be marketed, it is allowed to be used in human population. But in phase 4, we continue to monitor the adverse events, we continue to monitor outbreaks, and then in a much larger human population where it's being used, we get much better evidence of adverse events that might have been missed out in the trial, or where the sample size was not adequate to measure the incidence of the adverse events, or even the duration of efficacy. All of these we get in the what we call post-marketing surveillance, that is phase 4.
According to clinical trial practitioners, human trials are usually not supposed to lead to extreme adverse reactions. This is because the product has already gone through a phase of testing on animals with genetic codes similar to humans and is being tested on humans only after regulatory scrutiny and approvals.
Animal studies always precede the clinical trials. So first you have laboratory development of the vaccine, then you have animal trials, and then you have the human trials. You cannot start the human trials without demonstrating some evidence of safety and some evidence of immunogenicity in the animals.
During decades of vaccine development and application, cases of severe damage caused by vaccines have not been common. However, there are rare examples of adverse events. For instance, in 1955, insufficiently inactivated batches of polio vaccine caused an outbreak of polio in the US due to the presence of wild-type poliovirus strains. This became known worldwide as the Qatar incident, in which 40,000 children developed mild polio, 200 were permanently paralyzed, and 10 died.
The safety for any vaccine, new vaccine, is of great importance, particularly because when you use vaccine, there can be some component of there is a live virus goes in, then it can create a problem, and or incompletely attenuated virus, if that goes in, then that can cause a disaster. And this has been seen in long back in 1950s when there was a polio inadequately denatured polio vaccine, and this has caused more than 2,000 patients of polio vaccine to be suffered, and nearly 200 patients, they developed permanent paralysis, and 10 people died. Similarly, if the vaccine quality is not maintained, then this can cause severe allergic reactions. Sometimes it can cause the subtle disease, and also sometimes a serious allergic reaction. It can be because of the vaccine component itself or antigen component, or it can be adjuvant which is added into that. So vaccine safety, vaccine quality assurance is very important.
Another example is an aggravated or atypical disease following vaccination and exposure to wild-type viruses caused by a measles and respiratory syncytial virus or experimental severe acute respiratory syndrome or SARS vaccine. Regarding live attenuated vaccines, data suggesting elevated mortality in developing countries following vaccination with medium and high titer measles vaccines demonstrate again the need for cautious approaches when entering into early clinical trial phase. But these examples also highlight that root causes for problems can often be identified and principles for risk identification and mitigation can be developed.
The vaccine can have even more serious adverse effects. The usual immune response that takes place in the body against the invading microbe like a virus can get markedly aggravated by the immune response triggered by the vaccine, and you can get very severe damage to the body tissues because of the cytokines and the chemokines, which are chemicals that are developed by the immune system. So you actually get battered by the storm of the immune response, and that's not something you want. You want protection, but you can actually get battered by the response created by the vaccine. So that is one problem that we have to avoid.
The importance of long-term monitoring of adverse vaccine reactions was highlighted in late 1991 and early 1992. During that period, it was determined in follow-up studies that children who received the high titer Edmonston Zagreb strain of measles vaccine in certain locations in Africa and Haiti that are highly endemic for measles experienced high mortality rates compared with the mortality rates in those who received the standard Schwarz strain 6 to 10 months after being vaccinated. Furthermore, and for reasons that are unclear to the scientific community, the mortality rate appeared to be higher in girls than in boys. Because of these findings, the WHO suspended the use of the high-titer measles vaccine in October 1992.
Even vaccines today, which are old, can sometimes produce adverse event, which was not reported, which was not seen in clinical trial stage. And that is captured in a system which is called as an AEFI, Adverse Event Following Immunization. AEFI is a committee under Ministry of Health, and this committee gets a report of anywhere in the country which is notifiable any adverse event happening to a vaccine, and this goes into the detail, does causality assessment, whether this is because of the vaccine or whether this is because of the adjuvant or this is because of the wrong mixture of the vaccine and the adjuvant, or this is because of the faulty cold chain or because of any other thing. And if there is risk, what is called as a risk identification, and then risk assessment, what has been the risk, whether acceptable, not acceptable, whether you should stop, and whether this should have the national repercussion or this is just local, because this will have an effect on national policy. And therefore AEFI's role in Indian regulation is very critical and important.
There is a well laid out vaccine safety surveillance program in this country. This is called AEFI surveillance. AEFI means Adverse Events Following Immunization Surveillance. All 700 plus districts in this country have a AEFI committee that under the leadership of District Immunization Officer. And if there is a report of any adverse events following a immunization session, these are promptly investigated. Now, when at all times all of us are having some events or the other, just like deaths keep on occurring, we keep on falling sick, we develop fever. Similarly, when vaccines are being given all over the country, most of the events occur as what are called by chance. They are concurrent events, or they are called coincidental events. But they have to be investigated so that the person who is suffering from that event should not lose confidence.
Manufacturers confront one of the most difficult, complex, time-consuming and resource-intensive aspects of vaccine development when the decision is made to take a vaccine produced in small amounts in a pilot facility and to scale up production to commercial levels. Manufacturing high-quality and consistently potent vaccines on a large scale is a challenging process even for well-established pharmaceutical firms. Organizing effective and efficient vaccine distribution and delivery systems and communicating the importance of routine immunization to parents and health professionals are critical to ensuring adequate immunization coverage in India and around the globe.
In India, we have world's largest immunization program. We have a birth cohort of 26 million births every year, and another 30 million mothers who become pregnant and they deliver. So our current immunization program primarily targets this population of 5.5 to 6 crore population every year. And the whole program is structured that we reach these people in every nook and corner of the country. In 2015, the country was able to eliminate neonatal tetanus and maternal tetanus in this country. And this is a disease which occurs in the poorest part of the society. Today, if we look at our immunization program, just about 1 or 2% of the target population is not reached. We are able to reach, it means 97 to 98% of women, mothers, as well as the newborns who are eligible for these vaccines. That just shows the reach of the program.
Have you ever thought of becoming a volunteer for a human trial of a vaccine? If you have, you must have thought about how you can volunteer for it, if volunteers get paid, or the risks involved. We explain to you the processes involved in case you plan to volunteer for such trials in India in the future. This 30-year-old male was the first person to be administered the first dose of India's indigenous COVID-19 vaccine, Bharat Biotech's Covaxin, at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi. Besides AIIMS, 11 more sites were selected in India to test the vaccine.
Usually in phase 1 clinical trial, the recruitment criteria is slightly different from the other phases. Usually we recruit a healthy person, like currently in almost all COVID-19 vaccine trial, we recruit healthy individuals. Healthy means without any comorbid condition, like normal liver function, normal kidney function, without hypertension, without diabetes, and who have not been exposed to a particular illness, like in this in current scenario, COVID infection. A volunteer has full right to choose to back out the trial.
Each human trial uses a specific set of criteria to determine if a person is eligible to participate. Once a site receives approval to conduct clinical trials, it can advertise for volunteers, provided the advertisement is cleared by the ethics committees.
AIIMS, we got approval during middle of July. We advertised through various news agencies like DD News, and the response was overwhelming. More than 850 registration happened within 24 hours of announcement. Our required sample size was only 100, and finally we received more than 4,500 applications, and then we stopped.
Those keen on volunteering can also search independently on the Clinical Trial Registry of India, which lists out locations for a specific trial along with contact numbers. After the volunteers are registered, the trial site may call in the volunteer as part of its enrollment process, which includes ensuring that they are consenting only after they have understood all details such as purpose of the study, its advantages, disadvantages, and the procedure. Under Indian regulations, volunteers do not receive any remuneration for participating in trials. There is a pre-approved standard operating procedure for each trial, which allows compensation for food and travel whenever the volunteer has to visit the site, but this is a nominal amount. A data and safety monitoring board is set up for each trial to study the information collected throughout the process. It can even recommend that a trial be stopped if there is a major cause for concern. India's clinical trial rules provide for a formula to compensate participants who die or experience injuries, including disabilities, related to clinical trials.
This compensation is a monetary compensation as well as the free treatment of the subject in the hospital. Now, this compensation is calculated on the basis of a formula which we created and which is still valid. and that is dependent on 3-4 things. One is, if the subject is young, then he gets higher compensation. If the subject is old, he gets less compensation. Or if the inherent possibility of the death or mortality is very high without intervention, then he gets low compensation. If the patient or the subject is healthy, like in the vaccine, he gets very high compensation.
Based on this formula, the compensation would range from 2 lakh rupees to as much as 74 lakh rupees, depending on factors like how likely the participant was to die if they hadn't participated in the trials. If a healthy young volunteer dies, the next of kin would get the maximum compensation. The subjects which are chosen for the trial must be duly informed of the entire treatment that is to be meted out to them, along with the possible side effects.
The basic principle of medicine is do no harm. The same principle apply here also in any vaccine trial or any drug trial.
All the vaccines which are given in our immunization program are safe and effective. Occasionally mild fever may occur, local swellings may occur, for which simple medicines like paracetamol is given and that takes care of. But whenever there is an event which is of concern to the families and to the society, they are always investigated. And if you come across some events, please report to your health worker or to your doctor, and the program will ensure that these are properly investigated. Vaccines are absolutely necessary, and today's environment, we are hale and healthy, our children are healthy, and a major part or attribution can be because of the vaccines. Vaccines are like insurance for us and for our families and for our children.
Vaccines are a proven way of preventing disease. They led to smallpox eradication and took polio within the reach of eradication. But how do vaccines work? How does the immune system help us fight infection? What do T cells in human body mean for vaccine development? Do different vaccines work in different ways? When is herd immunity attained? Is herd immunity important to protect people who are not or cannot be vaccinated? And how long does herd immunity last? BioQuest will return with answers.